3 lives, 3 worlds, Lotus steps. Wherever step goes, Lotus blooms. Metamorphosis. Lotus Step Chapter 16, Book 1. Seeing the 3 highnesses beside the Bayou River disappearing into thin air with Princess Hongyu, the Imperial Master cursed in his heart. He was very lucky that he had just pulled a piece of cloth to cover Prince Ji's eyes. Otherwise, how could he explain that 2 living people disappeared out of thin air in front of his eyes? The only good thing that happened tonight was that His Highness disappeared at this time, and he didn't know where he went. He thought that this was probably His Highness indicating that he did not need to follow. This unfortunate night finally came to an end. But before the Imperial Master could breathe a sigh of relief, he found 2 black butterflies flying gracefully in front of his eyes, flying around him first in a circle and then in a circle. The Imperial Master was stunned for a while, and then he felt that he was about to have a migraine. For the first time in his life, he hated himself for being so knowledgeable. Not only did he know that these 2 black butterflies were soul-attracting butterflies coming from the underworld, but he also understood their effectiveness. This butterfly obviously was left to him by Lian San. Lian Sanning took the little princess to Mingxi and left him 2 soul-attracting butterflies, so he naturally asked him to take Ji Mingfeng with them. It's hard for him to pretend not to know. Because the beech tree they were squatting on just now was some distance away from the Bayou River, the princess did not hear clearly what the Imperial Master said to His Highness III. Therefore, he could not understand why Lian San wanted to bring a mortal to the underworld, and why he wanted to go to the underworld. Let him take another mortal to follow. However, he really didn't have the energy to wonder about this matter. How to explain to Prince Ji later that they would take a one-day trip to Mingxi would drive him to death. The soul-inducing butterfly flew around the 2 of them 3 times. Black Butterfly has arrived, and there is no point in thinking too much. In the end, either they will hook their souls and take them to the Underworld Division, or they will take the initiative to follow them, so that their souls and bodies will not be separated when they enter the Underworld Division. The Imperial Master was wondering why I had to suffer 3 consecutive crimes here tonight. Could it be because the late Emperor died early? Late Emperor, you died early. Why didn't you take me with you when you died? Prince Ji used his free hand to form a formula, followed the script given to him by His Highness the Third Highness, and took Prince Ji to the underworld with Xuanda. There are many legends about Hades in the mortal world. Most of them describe Hades living underground. After death, the ghost souls return to Hades, which means they return to the underground. But the underworld is not underground, but in the chaos that is independent of the world where gods live and the billions of mortal worlds where mortals live. It is jointly controlled by 2 siblings, Xie Hualu, the Lord of White Underworld, and Xie Galu, the Lord of Black Underworld. Take charge. From the creation of the world to the present, in the long evolution process of the universe, the mortals sent to the mortal world by Shaoan have already changed their beliefs, and naturally have forgotten the true origin and true meaning of the Hades, just like they have forgotten their own origins. Where the Imperial Master is considered a well-informed mortal among mortals. Regarding the underworld, he only knows 1 fountain of thoughts, 1 gate of ending life, 1 Tao of Wan Ran, 1 river of forgetfulness, 1 river of memory, 1 platform of reincarnation, and 1 more. Attract butterflies. Half of it was heard from his master, and half of it came from his early consultation with His Highness the Third Highness. The Imperial Master stood in front of Sibuquin in a daze. Although Cebu Spring is called a spring, it is actually a long river. Therefore, there is neither sun, moon nor stars, so it is difficult to tell the direction of the river, whether it flows from east to west or from south to north. Looking through the silver stars that fill the sky, one can only see that the river seems to come from the thick clouds and flow into the thick clouds. The Imperial Master suddenly understood that the thick cloud might be called chaos. Prince Ji, who finally regained his freedom and took off his blindfold, stood beside the Imperial Master. He looked up at the stone tablet 100 feet high by the river and read out the 3 characters engraved on it. I can't think about it. He looked around again. After looking around, he frowned and asked the Imperial Master, "Where is this place?" The national teacher's head suddenly grew big. Sebuquin is the first gateway to the underworld. After passing the Sebuquin, you can reach the Duanqing Gate, the real entrance to the underworld. When the Imperial Master was a child, he heard from his master that two siblings, Se Hualu and Xie Guju, the underworld masters of the underworld division, loved to torment mortals to achieve enlightenment because they had nothing to do in the underworld division all year round. Sebuquin is the proud work of Baimingju Xie Hualu. After a mortal dies, the ghost returns to the underworld. First of all, he must think 3 times. Think about the past life, think about this life, and think about the next life. What is the meaning of the past life? What is the meaning of this life? And what is the meaning of the next life? This is a level that helps ghosts look back on their lives, face themselves, and torture themselves. The savvy ghosts can soak in the fountain of thoughts for a few days, and no matter how many obsessions, resentments, and entanglements they have in their past lives, they will be almost enlightened when they come ashore. For example, if a pair of infatuated men and women agree to wait by the Wangchuan River for 3 years before their death, the one who dies first will basically have a dip in the spring and then climb out. He will immediately have an epiphany and break the agreement first, unable to support Wangchuan at all. Sebuquin is so outrageous. This shows that Lord Baiming, Se Hualu, is really the public enemy of the infatuated children in the world. Seeing that the Imperial Master was silent for a long time, Prince Ji asked again, "Master, Imperial Master, where is this place?" The Imperial Master was silent for a moment. "Oh, that's right. This is your dream. You are dreaming, and why did I appear in your dream?" "I just came to take a walk." The Imperial Master pretended to be relaxed. He looked around and smiled dryly. "Your Majesty, your dream is a bit fantasy. Ha 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 ha." Prince Ji was silent for a moment. "Master, Imperial Master, I am not a 3-year-old child who cannot tell whether I am dreaming or awake." He looked at the Imperial Master. In the legend, there is also a place called Cebu, which is the entrance to the underworld. After death, all ghosts return to the underworld and return to the underworld. The Imperial Master's smile froze. Ji Shixi is really knowledgeable and knowledgeable. Realizing how difficult it was to deceive Prince Ji, the Imperial Master chose to give up on himself and said calmly, "This is indeed the place you thought of, but the underworld is a mortal's way of saying that there is no underworld in the world. But there are underworlds. Ghosts are also a mortal's way of saying, and those in the underworld are not ghosts, but ghosts." Prince Ji obviously couldn't accept this reality, and cracks appeared in his calm expression. "You actually brought me to such a place." The Imperial Master quickly gave Ji Shixi a hand. After Ji Shixi reacted, he did not draw his sword and kill himself who brought him here. This was still far beyond the expectations of the Imperial Master. He couldn't help but be kinder to Ji Shixi and comforted him. "Young Master, don't worry, you and I are not ghosts. I am still a mortal body at this time, but there are some things that require you and me to come here." Of course, this could not comfort Prince Ji, but it diverted Prince Ji's attention at least. He frowned and said, "You mean Ayu is here?" The Imperial Master was surprised by Prince Ji's acumen, but it was not the time to admire him. He glanced at the other side and expressed his sorrow. "They crossed Sebuquin without waiting for us, and now I think they are at Duanqing Gate. But without the help of my senior brother Guan Guan." The Imperial Master covered his forehead. "Oh, my senior brother Guan Guan is the general, which is why he can lead Princess Hong Yu into the underworld." The Imperial Master had tried his best to be able to train to this level, but he suddenly remembered that Lian San was actually much younger than him in the eyes of mortals. He was quiet for a while and tried to correct it. "By the way, our master's disciples are look at Zhen Gu. Whoever has the best Zhen Gu will be our senior brother. The General Zhen Gu is too good, so even though he was the latest to join the ranks, he became our senior brother." The Imperial Master glanced at Ji Shixi and saw that Ji Shixi had no doubts. He breathed a sigh of relief. "Without the help of the general, I don't know how to cross Cebu Spring. You see, there is no bridge on the spring, no boat in the river, and there is no way to cross the river. It won't work either. We can't touch the water from the Cebu Spring. I think." The Imperial Master paused. After the words, I think, the Imperial Master saw that the billowing fountain was frozen instantly, and the frozen blue water was like a huge gem embedded in the long river, emitting a deep cold light under the reflection of the hanging stars. Many silver shadows under the ice are also frozen, they are ghosts crossing the river. The water god controls the rivers in the world. Being able to freeze the Mingxi River in an instant is most likely the work of the water god. Even if His Highness was not waiting for them, he must have left some seal on the river bank to help them cross the river at this time. Whenever he sees the method performed by Lian San, the National Master can be surprised. This is the god. The Imperial Master stared at the beautiful frozen river. He was stunned for a moment and concluded his previous words. I think we can walk directly there. After passing Subiaquin, you will reach Duanqing Gate. Duanqing Gate is more famous in the mortal world than Subiaquin. Mortals don't know that Subiaquin exists, but most of them have heard in legends that there is a Duanqing Gate in the underworld, guarded by a giant beast called Tu Bo. According to legend, Tu Bo had a sharp horn on his head, a tiger head with piercing eyes, a body like a giant bull, and a terrifying appearance. He guarded the Duansheng Gate and only allowed the ghosts who were dragged to the underworld by the key of reincarnation. Prince Ji looked at the simple door in front of him. It was a very tall stone gate, and the lintel was also made of stone, with the 3 characters Dishengmen engraved on it. The ochre-colored engravings are open and elegant, with a blood red signature on the left, Xie Hualu Shu. Prince Ji, who had accepted the reality and calmed down, glanced at the engraved words twice, and then glanced at the sharp-horned giant beast lying dying in front of the stone door. He frowned for a long time and pointed the hilt of his sword at the uncle lying on the ground, groaning and unable to get up. Is this the work of the general? The National Master also looked at the giant beast, and he felt in his heart that this must be Lian San's handiwork. But even if he explained that it was his senior brother Guan Guan, a mortal who had not yet achieved enlightenment, how could he hurt the Hades spirit beast to such a state? This doesn't make sense. The Imperial Master felt a familiar migraine, and he was silent for a long time. How is it possible, he said. Someone else must have come to invade the Hades division. I don't know if they are enemies or friends. Will something happen to the little princess? Us? This move was indeed effective. As soon as Prince Ji heard that Chengyu might be in danger, he immediately flew into the Duansheng Gate and hurriedly entered the Wanrandao. The Imperial Master looked at Prince Ji's back from afar and suddenly remembered that there was a beast in the Daoran. Broken, the blood stains on Tu Bo's body were still warm, indicating that Lian San had just entered Wanren Road not long ago. And most likely, he had not yet eliminated the 5 underworld beasts that were said to be even more ferocious than Tu Bo Ji Shitzi entered rashly. As a mortal, if he encountered a beast that would eat anything except the ghosts of meritorious deeds, there would be no doubt that this would be a fate. The Imperial Master's scalp was numb instantly, and he followed in a hurry without having time to think about anything. Although Wanren Road is called a corridor, it is not like a corridor. It is extremely vast inside, with purple crystals as the walls and extremely high beams inlaid with countless pearls. Probably because of the height and width of the space, although there are bright pearls illuminating the corridor, people's vision is still hazy inside. Stepping into it, the Imperial Master's face suddenly turned pale. There was no shadow in front of him, and he didn't feel any danger at all. However, at the moment when he was careless, an invisible claw stabbed hard into his left arm. Severe pain struck, and the Imperial Master instinctively drew his sword to resist, but the sword's piercing light was all nothing. Invisible and shadowless, but capable of hurting people, it is a beast of the underworld. Just as the Imperial Master was about to abandon his sword and practice the art, a white figure passed by his side like a gust of wind. The black iron fan touched his shoulder and pushed him back. The Imperial Master's eyes were dazed for a moment. Suddenly, a bird of prey screamed nearby, and a wisp of black smoke escaped from his left arm, condensing into the shape of a black bird. The shadow came, and the black shadow quickly disappeared in the rush. It is a black bird, one of the 5 great beasts of the underworld. Look at her. A cool voice passed by him. The Imperial Master felt the piercing pain from his sharp claws suddenly disappear, and his arms suddenly sank. It was His Highness who pushed the princess into his arms. The Imperial Master only had time to call out the word, "General," when he saw a crystal barrier suddenly stretched out a few feet in front of him, instantly covering the entire space from the top of the corridor to the ground. From the corner of his eye, he saw Prince Ji kneeling not far away holding a sword. He seemed to be injured as well. The sudden crystal barrier isolated them from danger, and His Highness the Third Prince, who had just saved his life, was as graceful as the wind. The moment before the little princess reached out to grab his sleeve, he had already rushed behind the barrier and disappeared deep into the corridor in an instant. Although His Highness the Third Highness pushed the princess into his arms, the Imperial Master was considerate and understood that Lian San had no intention of letting him hold the princess in his arms. The Imperial Master stretched out his right arm to help Chengyu. This was the first time that the Imperial Master had been in close contact with Chengyu since she came of age. Thinking that she was a mortal girl who had just entered the underworld and followed Lian San to fight with those underworld beasts, she must have been frightened. While trying to comfort Ye, she didn't expect that she suddenly threw away his hand and hurriedly ran in the direction where Lian San disappeared. The Imperial Master didn't react for a moment, but after all, his Taoist skills were superb, so he followed closely with his body first. Chengyu ran to the barrier, and instead of being concerned about it as expected by the Imperial Master, she was banging and beating randomly. She just stood there quietly, slightly pursed her lips, and stared at the end of the corridor. After standing for a while, Su Shi found that it was impossible to see clearly the fight between Lian San and the underworld beast at the end. She raised her hands to press the transparent barrier, tilted her head slightly, and made a gesture of listening. The Imperial Master was curious and stopped. Prince Ji rushed ahead of him, walked up to Chengyu in a few steps, and pulled her away from the barrier without any explanation. "It's dangerous here. Don't get so close." When Prince Ji's hand stretched out, Chengyu quickly took 2 steps back, still sticking to the thick crystal barrier. After seeing Prince Ji clearly, she was stunned, then made a silent gesture and whispered against the barrier, "Don't talk." The Imperial Master thought for a while and then approached the barrier, imitating the princess's posture and leaning against the barrier. He heard the faint sound of fighting in the distance, and he understood what she was doing. "Sure enough, I heard her explain in a low voice, I just want to know whether Brother Lian San is safe." Prince Ji didn't look very good. After a moment of stalemate, he gave way and said, "Then I'll protect you here." Chengyu didn't reply. She looked at Prince Ji strangely, as if she couldn't understand why Prince Ji cared about her. The Imperial Master was not interested in the confrontation between the two of them. He looked at Chengyu, who was worried about Lian San, and thought coldly in his heart, "Instead of worrying about the safety of His Highness, we should worry about the safety of those underworld beasts." Although the Imperial Master had only rubbed shoulders with Lian San just now, he was sure that he had read correctly. The Third Highness still only used his 27-bone iron fan when fighting against the underworld beast. The iron fan with cold iron as the fan bone and shark crocodile as the fan surface is indeed a rare magic weapon, but it is not Lian San's usual magic weapon. It can be seen that he did not fight seriously at all and was still playing with those underworld beasts. The wails of wild beasts suddenly came from deep in the corridor. His Highness should have gained the upper hand. The Imperial Master noticed that the princess's tense expression suddenly relaxed a lot. Now that the situation is stable, the National Preceptor feels that they have nothing else to do while standing here, so they might as well have a chat. He took the opportunity to chat with the princess, and they both asked and answered questions. "I wonder if the general who brought the princess here told her where this place is? Isn't this the underworld? Did the general ever talk to the princess about why he could bring her to Mingxi? Isn't that because Brother Lian San is your fellow disciple, National Master?" The Imperial Master never expected that he and His Highness the Third Prince would have a clear understanding of the arrangement of this matter, and he had nothing to say for a moment. But what he wanted to ask most was not these 2 questions. What he wanted to ask most was, then why did the general bring the princess to Mingxi? Does the princess know? Chang Yu didn't answer him immediately. She suddenly glanced at Ji Mingfeng. Prince Ji raised his head. She immediately lowered her eyelashes. After a long time, she whispered, "He said he brought me to see Dragonfly." The Imperial Master didn't know who Dragonfly was. The answer confused him, but he saw Ji Mingfeng suddenly froze. The Imperial Master said, "Dragonfly is." Then Ji Mingfeng said stiffly, "I didn't know that Dragonfly's death made you." Then the Imperial Master saw the strange look in the princess's eyes again. She frowned slightly as if she had difficulty understanding Prince Ji's answer. How could the prince not know? Because, she whispered, "It was Prince Ji who told Dragonfly died because of me. It was my stubbornness and ignorance that killed her. I am a person who has made mistakes 100 times and never knows how to repent." Her eyes suddenly turned red. "I know I will always bear the sin. I have not forgotten that day, you and Mengjin. You told me that I must bear this sin forever." Ji Mingfeng was stunned, and his face turned pale little by little. He seemed to be about to say something more, but at this moment, the crystal barrier was suddenly hit hard. Just as the Imperial Master had time to hold Cheng Yu's arm, black smoke broke out of the barrier and swept him and Cheng Yu into it. The Imperial Master quickly used his seal to control his sword and pierced it into the smoke. He heard the underworld beast whimper, but unfortunately it did not hurt any vital parts. The half-transformed underworld beast slammed him to the ground. It was a black fox. Although he was let go, Cheng Yu was still entangled in the black fox's fluffy tail and was caught in midair. The Imperial Master immediately pinched out the seal with blood from his finger, but the speed at which the seal fell was always a step behind that dexterous beast. Ji Mingfeng's long sword was already extremely fast among mortals, but wherever the sword touched, it didn't even hurt at all. To that cunning and agile spiritual beast, this black fox can actually break out of Lian San's barrier, which shows how ferocious it is. The National Master thought that Lian San was entangled at the end of the corridor by 4 other underworld beasts, so he had no time to save them at this time. My heart couldn't help but lift up in my throat. The underworld beast seemed to realize that it had the upper hand at this time, and couldn't help but proudly transformed into a human form, forming a barrier in midair. Behind the somewhat vague barrier, one of his tails was still entangled with Qingyu, unable to move, but his fingertips with extremely long nails touched Qingyu's cheek, and he smiled politely. "You can't take advantage of that divine king, so Xiaoka has taken advantage of this little beauty." Cheng Yu was very scared, but she didn't cry out. She just held her breath and tilted her head back, trying to avoid the face of the man who was still dark after the transformation and was getting closer and closer. Then she heard the man whispering to her teasingly, "Little beauty, don't hide." She vaguely understood what he wanted to do, so she could only struggle hard, but how could she survive the struggle in her mortal body? Just as they closed their eyes tightly in fear, they heard a very familiar voice behind them, seeking death. The voice contained anger. She opened her eyes suddenly, only to see the twisted face of Xian Hu, who was very close at hand. A spear passed through his left chest, and with a pick, Xuan Hu, who was forced back to his original shape, was once again thrown into the barrier formed by the crystal barrier, and the barrier thickened 3 layers in an instant. Lian San calmly hugged Cheng Yu, who was about to fall from the midair after losing the binding of the foxtail. But the hug only lasted a moment, and Cheng Yu didn't even have time to recover. By the time the Imperial Master flew up to catch her, Lian San had already let go of her. But she followed him almost instinctively, and before she could think about it, she stretched out her right hand, trying to hold Lian San's hand, but she only touched his fingers. Even the slightest warmth from his fingers made her feel extremely nostalgic after being frightened, but with a very short touch, their fingers missed each other. She tried to grasp his fingers again, but found nothing. She almost felt aggrieved, but the next moment she found that Lian San's hand had come back. He squeezed her tightly and then let go. "Be good," he said. All this happened in an instant. Chang Yu was still a little dazed until he watched Lian San return to the barrier. The Imperial Master, who watched all the little actions of Lian San and the little princess in this brief moment, felt that he needed to calm down. But there was little time for him to calm down. The next moment, the Imperial Master saw countless huge waves rushing from the depths of Wan'an Road, instantly filling the entire barrier on the other side of the barrier. The barrier seemed to have turned into a deep sea. No matter where the deep sea is in this world, it is the kingdom of the water god. The Imperial Master felt that he finally understood what the third prince meant by his words about seeking death. Yes, he should have noticed just now that what Lian San was holding in his hand was no longer the iron fan, but the halberd gun, which was said to be made of rare 10,000-year-old cold iron in the abyss of the North Sea. The first-class weapon that took 1,000 years and drank the blood of 1,000 dragons to wield is the divine weapon of the water god, the overlord of the sea. His Highness usually uses a fan and sometimes a sword, but the weapon he is most comfortable with is this long spear. This means that Lian San is starting to get serious. As if to verify the conjecture of the Imperial Master, the invisible mysterious beasts that are best at hiding their whereabouts in the air cannot hide their traces in the deep sea of the water god. Even a slight tremor of the body can pass through the current. Pass it to Lian San, who is standing quietly in the middle of the barrier holding a halberd and spear. The beasts of the underworld didn't know it, thinking that they could play their tricks in the water, and they also thought that they would join forces from 5 directions to besiege Lian Song, who seemed to have suddenly stopped fighting. Especially the black fox that was pushed into the barrier by Lian San's gun. Even though his body was seriously injured, he still wanted to kill Lian San. At the moment when the mysterious beasts took off, the peaceful water flow in the tranquil sea suddenly generated huge waves from the bottom, turning into 5 monstrous water columns. Each water column accurately captured a dark beast, as if in the deep sea. The terrifying whirlpool that destroyed countless ships dragged the underworld beasts hard and entangled them. And His Highness the Third Prince stood quietly in the middle of the water column, making no movement from beginning to end. Under such a power that cannot be resisted, it is difficult for the Imperial Master to feel anything other than admiration. He only feels that the water god's ability to control and manipulate the water in the world is really awe-inspiring. This kind of magnificence is incomparable to humane law, which makes him great. It's a feast for the eyes, but such extraordinary magic power is also a bit scary. The 5 underworld beasts were forced out of their original shapes by the water column. They turned out to be a black tiger, a black leopard, a black fox, a black snake, and a black bird. It was probably because Chang Yu had lost his mind in the underworld. I don't know. What kind of opponent have you provoked? You are still stubborn and shouting loudly. You broke into the underworld without permission. It is our duty as a holy beast to teach you a lesson. However, you use such evil methods to imprison us. This is an offense to the underworld. It's a serious crime, but you still haven't solved the evil law, so that this crime can be given a lighter punishment. His Highness the Third Prince smiled, and the smile was extremely cold. A mere beast from the underworld dares to discuss crimes with me. As soon as he finished speaking, the 5 water pillars starting from the outermost layer froze into ice bit by bit. It is not difficult to imagine. What will happen to these mysterious beasts when they are frozen to the innermost layer? The 5 underworld beasts finally felt scared and forgot to formulate words and sentences to maintain their underworld beast style. Just before they were about to be completely frozen with the water column, they said in fear in vernacular, You can't kill. For us, killing the underworld beast is a serious crime for the underworld. Oh, really? His Highness the Third Highness said lightly. The 5-wheeled icicles that had frozen the underworld beast suddenly twisted in his inadvertent way. He could only hear the 5 great underworld beasts wailing in unison, as if they were being tortured at that moment. The severe pain of breaking limbs and bones. But what was more terrifying was obviously not this one. The twisted icicles suddenly began to crack from the outermost layer, and the peeled ice flakes fell off one after another, layer after layer, and were about to crack onto the frozen mysterious beast. It is conceivable that if they are not stopped immediately, these 5 underworld beasts will crack inch by inch like the ice, and finally break into pieces and fall to the ground. They must die. A layer of sweat broke out on the forehead of the Imperial Master. He was not sure whether His Highness the Third Highness really planned to form such a big quarrel with Mingxi. Even if the Black Fox had just teased the little princess, would it be enough to kill it alone? He wanted to persuade him with words, but the little princess took action before him. Chang Yu was not so calm this time. She banged on the thickened crystal barrier, trying to attract Lian San's attention. "Brother Lian San, don't do this." Seeing Lian San looking up at him, Chang Yu was about to try to persuade Lian San not to offend the Lord of the Underworld and let the beasts of the Underworld have a way out, but when he spoke, he found that his voice was drowned in a clearer voice. The voice came from the depths of Wanran Road, with panic and urgency. "Third young master, please show mercy." From the depths of Wanran Road came the bright light woven by the stars, and what appeared following the sound was a woman in mysterious clothes, dressed in palace attire, looking like a female official, with a long string of immortal fairies of the underworld in the same color behind her. His Royal Highness Ran didn't even look back. He raised his hand, and the path leading to Wanran Road was frozen with ice and snow. A long line of underworld immortals were intercepted in the sudden wind and snow in the corridor. Chang Yu looked at the wind and snow in astonishment. Behind the crystal barrier, Lian San raised his eyes to look at her, and when his eyes met hers, he spoke. His voice should be very soft, and it would definitely not be able to penetrate the thick barrier he had set up in front of her, but she felt that she heard his voice. The cool voice sounded calmly in her mind. "I didn't hear clearly. What did you just say?" Chang Yu hurriedly said, "I told Brother Lian San, don't kill them, don't make enemies with Ming." "Why?" He smiled. "Are you afraid that I can't defeat the Lord of Hades?" She paused. "I'm worried." She frowned, pressing her hands tightly against the cold barrier, as if she could get closer to him. "Even if I can beat the Lord of Hades, but don't make me worry, Brother Lian San." "I'm very worried about you," she said seriously and with sincere words. "Don't make me worry." Obviously, those words were not spoken loudly, but as soon as the words fell to the ground, the icicles in the barrier suddenly stopped cracking, and the violent snowstorm in the road of confusion suddenly stopped, and the pieces of flying snow turned into thousands of things in an instant. Thousands of stars are falling down. Among the falling stars, the young man in white holding the cold iron divine weapon in the barrier lowered his head slightly, raised the corners of his lips slightly, clenched the halberd that touched the ground in his hand with his 5 fingers and turned the gun slightly, feeling a huge force against the ground. 5 rounds of icicles. I saw the icicles connected to the roof beams suddenly toppling over. At the moment of the toppling, all the frozen ice turned into water, forming a very wide waterfall that hung on the beams of the corridor. Such a magnificent change seems to be a force of nature, but it is not a force of nature, which is shocking. In the huge waterfall, the beasts of the underworld were finally able to breathe, but they did not dare to make any mistakes again. The long list of underworld immortals finally came to their senses from the stars in the sky. They looked at the underworld beasts that were restrained by the water flow in midair and saved their lives. They all gave a great gift. "Thank you, Third Young Master, for showing mercy." The leading female officer gave another salute after everyone else. "The Lord of the Underworld has long established the rules of the Underworld. If all living beings in the world ask the Lord of the Underworld for something, they must go through the Duansheng Gate and the Path of Desolation alone. If they pass through, the Lord of the Underworld will grant him a wish related to Hades." The female officer in Xuani knelt down and bowed again. Since neither the Earth Uncle nor the underworld beasts can stop the Third Young Master, the Third Young Master has received the promise from the Underworld Master. Therefore, at this time, Piao Ling dared to ask, what happened to the Third Young Master when he came to the Underworld Division? "What is the matter that requires my service?" The Third Highness has withdrawn his spear and turned his back to the curtain of water where the 5 underworld beasts were imprisoned. When the female official in Xuani who claimed to be Piaoling blurted out a polite word and stood quietly aside waiting for instructions, the third palace official said, "I want to go to the reincarnation platform to find someone. Please ask the female official to lead the way." He lowered his head and straightened his clothes. "Xiao," his words were very polite, but his eyes did not move an inch towards those Xuani fairies, which is the habitual gesture of a superior person. It is indeed too arrogant for a mortal to treat a group of immortal beauties like this. The imperial master was as meticulous as a hare and could not ignore such details. He took the initiative to explain to Prince Ji, "My senior brother Guan, he has profound Taoism. He often comes and goes freely in the 5 elements and 6 realms. He has seen countless immortals, so I don't think there is anything important about these Mingxi fairies, and their attitude is a bit dull, all because of this." He also laughed dryly twice in an attempt to ease the tense atmosphere at the scene, haha. But Prince Ji ignored him. Ji Shixi kept looking at Qingyu. He saw the crystal barrier in front of him suddenly disappear. Qingyu held up her skirt and ran straight towards Liansong. He had never known that she could run so fast. Liansan turned around at this moment. In the starry sky, he opened his arms. She threw herself into his arms and hugged him tightly. Ji Mingfeng suddenly remembered something Dragonfly once said to him. She said that things in the world are like this, and what suits His Highness may not be what His Highness wants, and what His Highness wants may not necessarily be what suits His Highness. But His Highness made this choice so that he would never regret it. When Dragonfly said this to him, there was some pity in his eyes. He had never known what the pity was in the past, but today he finally understood it. Because of regret, it was too late. When Chengyu was around him, he was really mean to her. In fact, everything is his inner demon. When he first met her in Qilua Mountain, he planted the root of delusion. The first time in his life that he saw a woman's face so carefully was that night at the foot of Qilua Mountain. Under the cold light of the clear moon, her face appeared in his sight, with dark eyebrows and clear eyes. Extremely beautiful. She had just escaped from the bandits' den, but she was calm and composed. When she looked up at him, her eyebrows were raised slightly, and there was a smile in her eyes. "I have never seen the Crown Prince, but I have seen the Crown Prince's jade pendant. It's something I like. I will remember it for the rest of my life." The voice, as if washed by the new rain in the empty mountain, was light and moving. Many times later, he thought that when she said to him with a smile, "I will remember the things I liked all my life," he was already standing on the edge of hell, and then fell into the hell of constant struggle because of her. In fact, it was a matter of course. And all the struggles are his alone. She knows nothing. He was happy for her deliberate approach. He was disappointed because she missed her appointment to listen to Ying. He was distracted by her unintentional words of intimacy. He was angry for her sincere expression. It's also him. She just wants to be friends with him. This is her sincerity, her innocence, and her cruelty. But this innocence and cruelty made him regain his sanity that night. That night of drunkenness in the North Study made him understand that his delusions were indeed just delusions. He is the prince destined to complete the great cause of the Lichuan Palace to unify the 16 barbarian tribes. The innocent and simple Princess Hongyu, who was raised in the capital, is not someone who can go with him. She wanted to be his friend, but he didn't want her to be his. He only wanted her to be his concubine, but she couldn't be the crown prince of Lichuan Palace. He has always been a decisive person, so making a choice did not take much time. He chose to keep her out of his life, because a princess who was naive and incomprehensible to the world and couldn't even protect herself could not participate in his great cause. His struggle and pain, everything seems to be related to Qingyu, but in fact everything has nothing to do with her, and he knows this very well. He was just tortured by himself, but he couldn't help but hate her, so he forced himself to ignore her over and over again. He knew that since their breakup, she had not been happy for a few days in the Lichuan Palace. But at that time, he didn't realize that his indifference was hurting her, nor was he aware of her pain. How could she be in pain? She was just a child who couldn't get candy and was making trouble willfully. How could it be pain? He grew up in a strict royal palace and was actually very numb to pain, so he forgot that pain caused by love is not the only thing in the world that can hurt to the bone. They really didn't spend much time together. Then that night she broke into Nanran's ancient tomb without permission. He actually understood that all the estrangement, alienation, and indifference she felt towards him now came from that night. It was the words he said to her that night that made them strangers today. At that time, he didn't think about how much those words would hurt her. He was so aroused by her boldness that he lost his mind. At that moment, he seemed to only want to make her hurt, a lot of pain and even more pain. Only through pain can we learn lessons. Ever since he was in charge of the palace when he was young, mistakes would occasionally occur in his plans. Therefore, she broke into the ancient tomb alone and interrupted his steps. In fact, it was just an unexpected mistake. Logically, it would not cause him any harm. Lose your mind. But it happened that she did it. She once again showed her recklessness and willfulness, and once again proved to him that she was not qualified for the role of the crown princess. This made him feel angry, miserable, and even desperate. He knew that he was not a procrastinating person, but when it came to her matter, even though he had made a decision, he always hoped that one day they could have that possibility again every midnight. He was still struggling hopelessly in the hell about her, unable to find a way out. All his anger and pain stemmed from his own obsession, but he couldn't help but vent his anger on her, as if hurting her would make him feel better. That night, the last time he saw her was her sitting alone in the huge shadow of the tomb beast, with no sparkle in her eyes. But at that moment, he remembered their first meeting, her white dress and her smiling eyes. The brilliance in his eyes almost eclipsed the moonlight. I will remember the things I liked all my life. When the whip turned the horse's head, he thought desperately, we are all in hell at this time. It was the first time in his life that he liked someone, but he was restrained by too many mortal thoughts. He suppressed himself and couldn't choose to like this person. All he did was push her further and further away. He thought this was the right thing to do. But if he doesn't know how to love someone, how can he know what is right? At that time, Dragonfly told him that His Highness made such a choice and hoped that he would never regret it. Never regret it. With the Mingjis guiding the way, it didn't take long to cross the Forgotten River and reach the reincarnation platform. When they crossed Wangchuan River, they did not share a boat with Lian San Chenju. When they got off the boat, Lian San led the princess straight to the reincarnation platform. The Imperial Master and Ji Shitzi were invited by Mingji to float the amethyst lotus near the reincarnation platform. Drink tea and rest on the leaves. The Imperial Master was already afraid of having Lian San and Ji Mingfeng in the same place and wished they could stay at least 300 feet apart tonight. His Highness the Third Prince showed no scruples in what he said and acted tonight, and Prince Ji was not easy to deceive. There were several times when the Imperial Master felt that he could no longer talk nonsense in front of Prince Ji. It was entirely because of Prince Ji's absent-mindedness that he managed to get through. The Imperial Master couldn't help but have a headache when he thought of this incident, so Mingji's arrangement was exactly what he wanted. Unexpectedly, after sitting down, I still heard the voices of His Highness the Third Highness and the princess on the Samsara stage in the wind. The Imperial Master spat out a sip of tea and asked Mingji, who was serving beside him helplessly, "Can you move the amethyst lotus leaf under our feet further away from the reincarnation platform?" Prince Ji, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "That's good." In fact, the stage of reincarnation is not far away from them, or close or not. The reincarnation tree that allows ghosts to enter the afterlife is planted on the high platform of Xianjing, suspended in midair. The giant tree is towering into the sky, piercing the sky above Hades. The crown of the tree is lazily surrounded by a group of silvery white clouds. It is the entrance to the afterlife. The silver light on the leaves is the ghost attached to it. The giant tree grows visibly with the naked eye. Branches are constantly protruding into the silvery white clouds at the zenith, and new branches and leaves are constantly attached, and new ghosts are born from the bottom of the trunk. His Royal Highness and Princess Hongyu were standing under the tree. Prince Ji was speechless after typing the words, "That's good." He seemed to be quietly listening to the conversation between the two on the reincarnation stage that was carried by the night wind. The Imperial Master could only see his face becoming more serious as he listened, and he couldn't help but be curious. He also put down his teacup and pricked up his ears. The first thing that caught my ear was the princess's voice. The Imperial Master didn't know what happened before, but he knew that what they were talking about at this time must be an extremely sad past event. The Imperial Master heard the name Dragonfly again. The princess's voice was extremely hoarse in the breeze. You said that only dragonflies in this world are qualified to judge whether I am right or wrong, but even dragonflies cannot be found on the reincarnation stage. She must not want to see it. Prince Na Yeji is right. It was my recklessness and willfulness that killed Dragonfly, so she didn't even want to see me after death because she hated me. They're talking nonsense. She has no reason to hate you. His Highness the Third Highness said with comfort in his low voice. But the princess answered almost without thinking. There is a reason, Brother Lian San. She choked briefly, because I killed her, because I was bad. But she immediately held back the choke, as if torturing himself. He continued to find excuses with Lian San, because I can't protect myself, but I always put myself in danger. Because I am a bold and willful princess who makes mistakes 100 times without knowing how to repent, because I am a sinner. There was a hint of crying at the end of the words, and she asked Lian San, "Look, are there many reasons?" The Imperial Master heard His Highness being silent for a while. Is it Prince Ji who told you these reasons? The princess did not answer him, and there was a slight tremor in her voice. So, I am a sinner. She concluded in a trembling voice, I know that I am a sinner, and it is I who should fall into the Ossuara pool and die. It was me. That night, when they left me in the woods in front of the tomb, I kept thinking, if only I was the one who died, why did I survive? The Imperial Master heard that His Highness the Third Highness was silent again. After a long time, he said, that's why Zhu Jin sealed this memory, because if you don't seal them, you won't be able to survive, right? Maybe the princess nodded, maybe not. The Imperial Master couldn't see clearly, but he heard the princess's voice getting hoarse. I think if I'm bad enough, as Prince Ji said, I can bear all this. I can still live a good life, but I'm not that bad. Her voice trembled fiercely, Brother Lian San. I can't live because I'm not that bad. I can't bear the death of a dragonfly. She held on for a long time and breathed hard. She didn't cry, but her hoarse and trembling voice sounded extremely desperate and heartbreaking. She desperately said to Lian San, I don't know what to do. I feel like living is very hard. The Imperial Master saw Prince Ji sitting across from him shuddering violently, and his already not-so-good face instantly turned pale. That's not the case. He heard him say hoarsely, his voice was suppressed and laborious, extremely light. Naturally, no one on the reincarnation stage heard his words, but in the breeze, at almost the same moment, the Imperial Master heard His Highness the Third Prince say the same words as Prince Ji. That's not the case. It's not like that. These were the 5 words spoken to Chengyu. But these 5 simple words made her react for a long time. She pursed her lips and looked blankly at the young man in white in front of her, because she had never thought about any other possibilities. For this matter, in a moment, then, a blank expression appeared on her face. If this is not the case, then, what is it like? His Highness the Third Highness said calmly, Dragonfly's death is not entirely your fault, and you are not a sinner. Do you understand? When he said this, his expression was very calm, as if this was a matter of course, and the possibility he mentioned was the reality of this matter. Because of his calmness, she also wanted to believe that what he said was true, but she couldn't. No, it's my fault. She paused and tried hard to suppress the tears. She swallowed hard. I also made excuses for myself, thinking about it again and again. I told myself that before entering the tomb, I knew all the mechanisms in the tomb. I had to go and break into it myself, not entirely because of my pride, but also because even if I told Prince Ji, they might not be able to succeed, because what I knew not completely. I can gamble with my own life, but I can't gamble with other people's lives. I have made such excuses before. He didn't respond to her immediately. She saw him raise his finger and stroke the corner of her eye, touching it slightly, as if she was crying. She blinked, and her eyes were indeed a little blurry. She raised her head slightly, trying to hold back the tears in her eyes. Then she heard him speak, his voice still calm, and he told her calmly, That's not an excuse, it's the truth. She closed her eyes and shook her head. No, she swallowed the pain in her throat. This is just a high-sounding reason I gave myself to make myself feel less guilty. But Prince Ji is right. I can actually choose not to break into the tomb. If I don't go, Dragonfly will not die. His fingers at the corners of her eyes paused. It's Prince Ji again, he said, his voice a little unhappy. She opened her eyes. She never remembered that he liked to ridicule others, but at this moment, the corners of his beautiful lips curved into a mocking arc. I don't think he told you when he scolded you, if you don't go after breaking into Nanran's ancient tomb. It will be difficult for him to find anyone else who can successfully retrieve Nanran's ancient book. This will only lead to more innocent people losing their lives on the battlefield, right? She was a little stunned. Indeed, no one had ever told her this. The finger that was wiping her tears paused on her cheek, then slid down to her left shoulder, making her lean towards him slightly. It is not easy to rediscover the long-lost method of breaking the tomb of Nanran's ancient tomb. It is even more extraordinary to be able to obtain those specious methods of breaking into tombs, to be well prepared, and to have the courage to break into tombs, to be able to respond tactfully when faced with the sudden mechanisms in the tombs. If I were that Prince Ji, he stopped, and she looked up at him. He leaned over slightly and whispered in her ear, I only think about how smart our Au is to come back safely. How smart our Au is to be able to come back safely. Her throat was blocked and she couldn't speak. She tried to pause and tried to swallow all the choking and pain into her throat like before, but she failed this time. The tears that had been suppressed for a long time finally burst out of her eyes uncontrollably. She sobbed very quietly at first, and when his arms wrapped around her shoulders, she finally couldn't help but burst into tears. Like a boat that had been damaged by wind and rain, it finally found a port to berth in. Her hands firmly grasped the clothes on his chest, and she pressed herself tightly into his arms. It seemed that all her grievances had found an outlet. She couldn't help crying, but she still couldn't help but doubt. She sobbed and said every word in his arms. Yes, it's because Brother Lian-san is always facing me. That's why he said this. No, he said softly, although Dragonfly died, you allowed more people to live. This was not a fault in the first place. He continued, I also make many decisions before the military. The decision I make is often to let some people die in order to let more people live. I don't think there is anything wrong with this, and I have never felt any burden. If the dragonfly dies to save you, you are guilty, then am I even more unforgivable. She slowly raised her head from his arms, as if she had listened to his words, but there was still confusion in her eyes. This is the obsession of mortals. His Highness, the Third Highness, who was sitting in Jichangshan and discussing matters with Emperor Donghua, had never been so verbose, but even if he talked so much tonight, it seemed that he could not make her suddenly understand. In the past, His Highness the Third Highness would have been bored and would have given up. Not to mention that the various troubles of mortals were not worth mentioning in his eyes. But tonight, he seemed to suddenly have endless patience. He also carefully pretended to be a mortal, using mortal logic and wisdom to guide her. There are many inevitable deaths and sacrifices in this world. Those are regrets, not sins. She finally wavered and seemed to believe that it was not a sin, but maybe that night had caused too much damage to her. After getting out of one knot, she immediately entered another knot, even if it is not a sin, but Dragonfly must hate me very much. As long as I think of this, I will. She doesn't hate you. She doesn't even have regrets. When he blurted out these words, His Highness was stunned for a moment, and he finally realized his terrible patience tonight. Everything is impermanent, and empty. It is completely meaningless to argue with emptiness. But at this time, he helped her to argue with this impermanence and emptiness. His consistent reason told him that this is very strange. But in order for her to be freed, she had to complete this inexplicable thing. This was the original reason why he brought her here tonight. He rubbed his forehead and tried to understand mortals more deeply in order to relieve her pain. The ghosts who are not on the stage of reincarnation have only two places to go. One is the afterlife, and the other is the belly of the beast. Since the dragonfly's name is recorded in the Book of Death, she successfully passed through Wanran Road and came to the reincarnation stage. The fact that she is not on the reincarnation stage at this time can only mean that she has entered reincarnation. It's not that she doesn't want to see you. This is not something she can decide. She opened her eyes wide and murmured uncertainly, "Is that so?" He looked at her. You have to understand that a ghost with regrets will not enter the next reincarnation so quickly. Dragonfly is not here, which means she has no regrets. What does it mean to have no regrets? He patiently explained to her, it means saving lives. She has no regrets about losing you. Even if she chooses again, she will still sacrifice herself to let you live. In this matter, no one has regrets except you. He said lightly, Prince Lianji probably none. Her lips trembled, unable to speak. He looked down at her for a while and asked her, "Do you believe me?" After a long while, she nodded gently. He spoke again, "Can you get rid of this past?" She still paused for a long time, but still nodded. Just when he was about to let her go, she asked him softly, "I have so many regrets. Am I too cowardly?" This question is so naive. He stopped letting go of her and paused. But she's so naive that she's a little cute. He studied her expression for a while and saw the undisguised confusion and anxiety in her eyes. She was very clumsy, but her dark eyes were no longer as lifeless as before, so even though she showed such a clumsy look, which also made him feel better. He held her shoulders again and let her forehead rest on his chest. "There is nothing wrong with having regrets," he said softly. "There are always all kinds of regrets in people's lives. The regrets that happened because of you, this life you will encounter a lot more. Only by accepting this regret can you truly grow up." He finished the last sentence before she looked up. He told her, because this is how mortals grow up. Dragonfly's death is a regret, and we must accept this regret, because this is how mortals grow. How to face this tragedy is another answer, completely different from what Ji Mingfeng and Mangjin told her. In that long moment, Cheng Yu was actually not sure what she was thinking. For a moment, she seemed to have returned to the woods in front of Nan Rant's ancient tomb. On that cruel night, everyone left the cemetery. She sat in the shadow of the tomb beast, accompanied only by the bright but cold moonlight above her head and the sad beast calls from the woods. She was deathly cold and in pain. When she hugged herself tightly and cried bitterly, this time, someone finally came to her side. He gave her a hand, a hug, and a lot of warmth. He told her that it was not all her fault, that it was a regret in her life, and that she should learn to accept this regret so that she could grow up. The still butterfly finally emerges from its cocoon. Qingyu hugged the young man in white in front of her tightly, and 2 tears seeped out from the corners of her eyes. She thought these would be the last tears she would shed for Dragonfly and for herself who could not face the past. She should grow up. The sky-high reincarnation tree spread above their heads like a green cloud. The breeze moved gently, and the leaves carrying ghosts rustled in the night wind, seeming to celebrate each other's upcoming rebirth, and the sky was filled with silvery flowers. The stars dance in the night, like countless fireflies, lighting up the endless night with countless bright lights. End of Lotus Step Chapter 16, Book 1. By Tangqi. English translated using Google.